Welcome to our meeting on the Comprehensive Wastewater Treatment Facilities Plan. We'll be having a discussion of the wastewater treatment facilities plan that was generated by the Basin Management Action Plan from Wakulla Springs. I'm going to go ahead and start our presentation at this point so you have a reference. We have members of our team from Jim Stidham and Associates, Tetra Tech, Applied Technology and Management, Magnolia Engineering, Balmoral Group, and Advanced Geospatial Incorporated. The reason for our meeting is that it was determined that conventional septic systems are producing contaminants that flow to the upper Wakulla River and Wakulla Spring and cause contamination of our surface waters and groundwater in Leon County and Wakulla County. Leon County is conducting the Comprehensive Wastewater Treatment Facilities Plan project to analyze the cost-effective options to improve water quality throughout the county by identifying alternatives to these conventional septic systems. The goal of this meeting is to inform our citizens about our current progress on our project and to educate them about technologies that may work for the different geographic areas throughout the unincorporated area. Our agenda for the evening is to describe the need for the project, provide an overview of the project in its entirety, review the findings for the first 3 tasks of the report, review the next steps that we'll be taking to complete our analysis, and then provide an opportunity for questions and discussion. And I'd like to turn this over now to Tony Holly, who is with Jim Stidham and Associates, so that he can go through our steps.
All right. Good afternoon, Tony Holly with Jim Stidham and Associates. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the need. So this project is in response to the Florida Department of Environmental Protection's request for a remedial action plan. This is to limit the amount of nitrogen released within the Wakulla Basin Management Plan area, or the Wakulla BMAP, as some of you may have heard. This project is the county's response to that request from the state, and the Wakulla BMAP area covers a majority of Leon County, as shown in the picture on the right-hand side of the slide. All right. So historically, Wakulla River and the springs were crystal clear, lots of native vegetation, as you can see on the pictures on the left. And today the water is much darker. We have many different types of invasive species and algae mats that have kind of taken over, and we need to, try to find or limit the potential contaminants that may affect that area. All right. All right, so all households release wastewater of some form or fashion. The typical septic tank, drain fields typically used are not designed to reduce nitrogen. In order to reduce nitrogen, more advanced treatment options must be considered. These typically include some of the following. ATUs, or aerobic treatment units, are systems that include a blower system that introduces air into the septic tank to promote nitrogen breakdown and do not require a professional engineer to design. Performance-based systems are treatment systems that are specifically designed by a professional engineer to meet certain reduction criteria, such as total nitrogen, fecal, total coliform, BMAP, or not BMAP, excuse me. In-ground nitrogen reducing biofilters, or INRBs, are systems that utilize a sandy mulch layer under the drain field to promote a bacterial growth and help to further reduce nitrogen. Cluster systems are systems that utilize the above mentioned technologies, but allow for more than one home to be connected in a central sewer system. Central sewers, they utilize a central gravity or force main to transport wastewater to a central sewer plant. All right. All right, so for this project, our team was requested to complete the following 8 tasks. We completed the first 3 tasks, with this being the 4th. Within the first task, we developed a nitrogen reduction score across the county. This score is a calculated vulnerability for each parcel based on the potential for nitrogen release to the underlying groundwater. Task 2, we determine the cost effectiveness for each of the different treatment technologies. We are currently approved by DEP. Well, DEP now, it was Department of Health. For task 3, we're looking at other factors that may influence the selection of the available technology, such as land acquisition, rules, groundwater levels, and we'll go into that in a little bit more detail when we get into task 3. And as far as the current task, we're presenting this information to the general public and requesting feedback. This feedback will be assessed in the following task. All right. As part of this project, we chose to take an initial broadened approach to the assessment of the county. In tasks 1 through 3, we're looking at the county as a whole and not individual parcels or project areas.
Tony, Tony. Marcy, can you step in?
Yeah, I'll pick up from here. So to date, we've completed tasks 1 through 3. So task 1, as Tony was talking about, was those geologic criteria that's underlying the land uses, the karst topography, anything on the ground that's going to affect what technology would work. Task 2 is where we introduce the cost for each type of system. Task 3 is looking at some of the other factors that affect what methods we can use to mitigate that nitrogen load. And then we're here today at task 4. So we've been holding a series of public meetings to get input on the data we've gathered as part of the first 3 tasks. All the information from the first 4 tasks will then feed into task 5, where we start looking at the county on smaller scale areas to figure out which technology works best where. And then task 6, where we look at the reductions achieved by upgrading to those systems. And in both task 5 and 6, we're also looking forward for recommendations for future development to help mitigate future nitrogen impacts. All that'll feed back into another round of public meetings in task 7 before we go into task 8 with our final report and presenting to the board. And it looks like we have Tony back. Tony, are you there? Oh, he's still connecting the sound. So if you want to flip to the next slide, I think that's just the cover for task 1. And then we'll see if Tony has sound.
Hey, do you hear me now?
Yep, we do.
All right.
We're ready to launch into the task 1 on the next slide.
Yeah, let me get back to the presentation here. There it is. All right. Close that. All right. Apologize for that. All right, so as part of our first task, we're going to look at the geographical data from the county as a whole. From this data, we started to develop a GIS database to graphically store and process the data. After assessing the individual factors, that we developed a scoring matrix to determine the nitrogen reduction score across the county. This score is essentially a score of the potential for nitrogen vulnerability of the underlying groundwater. Weights are applied to the individual factors based on a combination of professional judgment and research. These weights are subject to change prior to the final report. Now, the final weights at the conclusion of task 8 will be based on the initial weights plus input received in the previous task. Okay. So this is a visual representation of the nitrogen reduction score across the county. The higher scores are denoted in red, while the lower scores are denoted in blue. The higher the score, the higher the vulnerability an area has in relation to the contribution of nitrogen to the underlying groundwater table. All right. So in general, the findings of task 1 were the higher vulnerability was determined in areas to the southeastern end of the county. Scores were impacted primarily due to soils, aquifer confinement, and proximity to wetlands and other surface waters. An 80% reduction is potentially could be achieved with the conversion of existing septic tanks to some form of advanced wastewater treatment. All right, we'll go into task 2. All right. So this task includes a cost comparison of advanced wastewater treatment systems to that of traditional septic tank systems. Each of the treatment types are summarized based on total cost and cost per pound of nitrogen reduced. This task summarized the treatment types into the following 3 categories. All right, so we've got the advanced on-site wastewater treatment systems, which these systems are classified by any system that is located on the same parcel where the wastewater is generated. And we have cluster systems. These systems utilize the same technologies as those listed above, although include multiple homes within a central treatment collection system. And then the sewer, the central sewer, that's utilized in central wastewater treatment system, and usually encompasses a much larger area than your typical cluster system would. All right. Generally, the goal will determine the cost per pound of nitrogen removed in relation to the efficiency of each type of system. This approach allows us to summarize the general cost effectiveness for each of the individual treatment types to develop the most feasible approach to meet the nitrogen reduction goals. All right. I'll stay on this slide for just a second. So each of the treatment types or each of the treatment systems evaluated were broken down to the average cost per pound of nitrogen reduced. As stated earlier in the presentation, the primary goal here is to determine the most practical and cost-effective way to meet the nitrogen reduction requirements of the state. All right. All right, so the findings of Task 2 report showed that on-site sewage treatment and disposal systems are higher when included as part of a new construction in relation to the other treatment types. In-ground nitrogen reducing biofilters have the lowest cost per pound of nitrogen removed, primarily due to the general construction, lack of mechanical/electrical components, and lack of continued monitoring or long-term monitoring. Active treatment systems are the most cost-effective when compared to traditional septic tanks. All right, so central sewers have the highest nitrogen reduction, but is also one of the most expensive options. A lot of this has to do with the collection system or the force main systems that have to be constructed in order to connect these remote systems to the central wastewater treatment plant. The cost of benefit improves if the sewer connection fees are subsidized. And the cluster systems are the most cost-effective, or more cost-effective than individual systems when they are part of a new development. All right. So this will be a task 3. All right, so this task evaluated other potential factors that may influence the selection of a particular technology. Based on these factors, a selection criteria was developed and will be integrated into the GIS database, or was integrated into the GIS database. If a particular criteria does not apply to a particular technology, then the score was left blank or was not computed in the average. All right. All right, so this chart was developed to look at the evaluation factors that may influence the selection of a particular technology, such as right-of-way acquisition or scalability for the county as a whole, and may be modified when looking at individual parcels or project areas as we progress into task 5. For the example of right-of-way acquisition, a technology like central sewer or cluster gets a score of 1 since the right-of-way would potentially be required for this technology to be considered. This would be an additional cost that may affect the feasibility of these technologies. Scalability does not look favorable for on-site treatment systems because these systems are not designed to be scalable in the initial design of this type of application. The highest rated technology based on the evaluation factors is the INRB. As a majority of these factors do not impair the use of this technology, while cluster systems have the worst score due to their limited use. All right. The findings of Task 3 report found that INRB scored the highest since these systems can be installed in nearly all locations that traditional systems can be installed. Cluster systems scored the lowest since their use will be limited by many of the factors that were evaluated that were shown in the previous matrix. The evaluation factors may change throughout the county based on applicability and site characteristics. All right. So the information obtained in this public meeting and the previous public meetings will be utilized in the development of Task 5. We're going to take in all the questions and comments that we've received and basically put those together in a Task 4 summary report. All right, let me go into the next one real quick. All right, so as we proceed forward through this current task, we will evaluate the comments received, basically what I just stated. But the following tasks will be utilized and will be provided in a Task 4 summary report that will be put on the project website, which is leoncountyfl.gov/wastewater. In the future, as we progress further into this project, this will be a location where you will be able to receive the most up-to-date information associated with this project. The Task 7 public meetings will be held in a couple months. And I know I kind of went through this kind of quick, but it's a lot easier to do whenever went through it a few times in my head. And this is the 5th time that we've presented this presentation. So hopefully I've streamlined everything to a point where the information provided is accurate and comprehensive. So again, thank you for attending this public presentation. We hope we have provided you with useful information and look forward to hearing from your comments. At this point, I'll open up the floor for comments. If you would be pleased to type your questions into the comment bar so we can read them out loud and provide responses. If we don't get to your question, we will include all questions and responses in the Task 4 summary report. All right, go ahead. And I do not have the ability to see the comments at this point. So Marcy, if you have the ability, or if Teresa has the ability.
Yeah, right now, there's nothing in the comment. Teresa, do you?
I don't see any comments either.
Yeah. Do we want people to raise hands?
We can try to raise hands and have comments taken that way. We've got a limited number of participants. So if you'd like to make a question or make a comment, if you could raise hand.
Bob is first in the stack.
All right.
Yeah.
Hey, Teresa, Mr. Ryan's up front, and then followed by Mr. Dial. I'll go ahead and meet Mr. Ryan.
Okay, thank you. So Terry?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good.
Mhm.
One question, Tony and Teresa, I do not see a way to enter comments by hand here.
Okay.
Okay, I don't see anything.
Mr. Ryan, it's in the chat functionality. If you hit chat on the bottom of the screen, you can type it in there.
There we go. Thank you. Tony, in the there was a map that had different red color, different colors, red, green, yellow, whatever. And
Yes.
have you been able to analyze down to the particular lot level?
So the initial approach.
Or did I miss it?
No, you're fine. So the initial approach was to look at it in a general approach across the county. We did look at individual parcels to a point as we develop this map, but Task 5 is going to be where we narrow it down to either project areas or individual parcel areas.
Good. Okay, good. We have a lot of folks here from the residents of Centerville Road group along Centerville Road. And most of us, probably about 90% are on septics right now. So that's
Okay.
of great interest to them right now. Thank you.
I completely understand.
And Bob, I'm gonna see if I can figure out how to do this.
If you can just hover your mouse over his name, you can ask him to unmute.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good. I'm unmuted.
Hey, Bob.
Hey, good to see all of you again. I've got a couple of questions, but they're distinct, so I'll just ask the first one, and you can invite me to ask the second one if you see don't see
Okay.
anybody else coming along. Anyways, my concern is with the use of 65% as the nitrogen removal assumption for the passive INRB. Many of us who are present this evening were in on a meeting with FDEP and the Department of Health on October 20th, 2020. And at that meeting, the DEP folks clarified that the 65% nitrogen reduction value used in the BMAP was used as an aggregate estimate for the array of possible nitrogen reducing OSTDS technologies, and that it was not necessarily an appropriate number to use for INRBs. We also, the Wakulla Springs Alliance also wrote a letter to the county commission. I believe it was actually maybe a week before that. And it was actually in late September of 2020, in which we pointed out that the 65% reduction that was found for the INRB in the pilot study was for a system with pressure dosing and liners, and that the lead author of that pilot study project, Hazen and Foyer's report, observed that an INRB without pressure dosing and a liner might not achieve any more nitrogen reduction than a conventional OSTDS. So in the letter that the Wakulla Springs Alliance sent to the county commission, we urged you folks not to assume 65% nitrogen reduction for INRBs because there's basically no empirical evidence to support that assumption. And we recommended that you either assume only 50%, in which case there's no incremental improvement in nitrogen reduction over OSTDS, or do some kind of a sensitivity analysis that captures the range of possibilities. What I read in chapter 2 or task 2 report was that if and when DOH revises the applicable regulations to allow for the use of INRBs with pressure dosing and liners, that the study, your study, would be updated at some future time.
Correct.
At that meeting in October of 2020, the folks from the Department of Health, Eb Roeder, and Dr. Gao told us that that revised rule was in process at that time, and was just undergoing final internal review. And I attempted just before this meeting started to see if that had actually been promulgated at this point, but my Googling failed, so I don't know what the status is. So the question I want to ask is, given all that history that you were all a party to, why did you still use 65% as the assumed nitrogen reduction for the passive INRBs? And why have you not included the alternative design with pressure dosing and a liner?
So the 65%, which I remember your letter, and I know we had talked about this early on. The 65% is the feedback that we originally received from DEP. We haven't received any additional feedback on reducing that to 50% or 55 or 60. Now, the rule that you're speaking of, it is still in process. It has not been fully approved yet. And once we get data to show otherwise, we are more than willing to change the report to reflect that. Now, we are currently well, Leon County is currently doing a study on both. Well, we have an MOU, a memorandum of understanding with DEP to install a lined dose system. Actually, we're doing 2 of them. And we're currently in the process of finalizing that MOU to allow us to put that system in and start sampling it. We also have installed many of the non-lined INRBs, and we have sampling ports in those as well. And once we get I think we have 1 additional line system or non-line system that is to be installed, then we'll start the round of sampling with DEP. And if we get empirical data that states that it does not meet the 65% criteria, the way that we have written the GIS database associated with this is just a plug and play value. That number can be reduced and the values associated with those will be reduced as well.
Well, I guess my comment is to the county. Does it make sense to you folks to proceed with a number that's not currently substantiated? And I would argue that you did get a different answer from DEP. I just finished reminding you that we were orally told by Wyder Holman and Kevin Coyne that 65% was not a number to apply specifically to INRBs. County folks, does it make sense to you to go forward with cost-effective analyses that are based on numbers that basically aren't supported? At some point, y'all are gonna finish this study, and we're gonna have an assessment here that could be completely wrong.
In our follow-up meetings with DOH now, part of DEP, they have indicated
Oh,
that
yes, right.
65%. Right,
Say it again.
they're all part of DEP now, but our most recent discussions with Ed Broder and Dr. Gao have indicated that the 65% is an acceptable use at this time until sampling indicates otherwise. And they have,
Okay.
they have initiated sampling.
Okay. All right. Well, that answers that one. I've got a completely unrelated question to raise, but I'm going to hold off.
So sorry, Bob, real quick. I think, Pat, I saw you actually raising your hand. Did you have a? If so, oh, sorry, Pat, we would need to unmute you. Do you have a?
Okay,
Yeah,
got me?
okay, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I live in Centerville Trace, and I'm new to this whole thing, but Teresa contacted me back a couple of months ago to find out if our neighborhood was interested in still having a sewer system. And I assured her we were. And I think at that time she was getting ready to submit a grant and see if she could get the funding. And I just wondered what the status was on that.
We have not heard back from the state of Florida on the watershed, on the water protection grants. As soon as we hear, we will be in contact with you, I promise.
Okay, that's great. I appreciate it. I just want to keep everybody up to date here. And I thought I might have missed something and I wanted to be sure. Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So Bob, we can go back to you now. I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay, great. On page 23 of the task 2 report, the top of that page, there's a discussion of the approach that was taken to the non-market costs and benefits in the task 2 analysis. And in the second paragraph at the top of that page, it says in the second line, non-market costs include the cost of disease from well contamination and diminished tourism as measured by changes in water clarity of Wakulla Spring, measured here by the use of glass bottom boats. And I then looked through the rest of that document to see what explanation there might be for how this cost was estimated, and found nothing to explain that. So I want to point out that there's no empirical data to support the assumption of a connection between water clarity and nitrogen pollution at Wakulla Spring. And in fact, there is no biochemical argument for why nitrogen pollution of Wakulla Spring should result in decreased water clarity. So my question is, why did you use this as a an assumed relationship between nitrogen and glass bottom boat use? And where could I find the details on how you actually went about making this calculation?
I'll be happy to forward those calculations to you. They're partly embedded in the Appendix H, but additional details are appropriate. You know, it's drawn from DEP's commitment to this by defining the impairment of the entire spring to nitrogen. Whether that is complete or sufficient is sort of beyond our scope. The assumption is that the springs and water quality are affected by nitrogen. So if there's an issue with that, it goes back to the BMAP process. It was of interest to go ahead and see if there were going to be significant improvements that might affect the cost benefit of any of these alternatives, as opposed to just looking at the cost. So some benefits warranted being attached. Those seemed immediate to me at the time. And again, you know, others can be included, but we did have some information on, you know, that relationship between change in recreational use as is documented by the delta in glass bottom over time. Again, I understand that tannic waters and brown waters are not the same as nitrogen, but you've also got the change in bottom vegetation over time, which seemed to be very closely tied to nitrogen levels. And that again ties back to the effectiveness or the attractiveness, if you will, for use of the glass bottom boats. So it was one metric that was out there that was handy, that was site specific. We can have a dialogue later about whether or not those calculations warrant inclusion. The numbers aren't big. They don't affect the outcomes very much in terms of cost benefit, but we didn't want to be to ignore them in any significant way. So again, I can bring you back the spreadsheet where those calculations were made.
Sure, yeah, we could communicate outside this venue on that. But as far as I know, nobody has asserted with scientific explanations or evidence that there's a direct relationship between nitrogen concentrations and the darkness of the water. And so if you've got evidence on that, I'd sure like to see it. So let's communicate further on this. That's all I've got at this point, folks. Thanks for holding this session.
Do we have any other questions? Any other comments that someone would like to make? We do have a comment form that's included on the website at leoncountyfl.gov/wastewater. You can also make any comments through that comment form if you're uncomfortable making comments on the Zoom meeting.
And we're looking for any comments by the end of the week, just to add to that.
Teresa, Mr. Dial has another question, or he raised his hand.
Did you have another question, Bob, or was that left over?
So I was about to ask what the timeline was for additional comments. I don't think I can get this stuff in writing by the end of the week. Is it possible to keep the window open a little longer than that?
What would work for you, Marcy?
I mean, it's up to the county. Yeah, the delaying task 4 just delays everything that comes after it.
When do you think you'd be able to get it to us, Bob? Recognizing you've got so many other things on your plate.
Yeah, I've got to do plant sampling tomorrow morning, first thing, to try to figure out why the emergent plants are dying on the river. And I've got a meeting to run next Friday with a major presentation. The 30th would be real easy for me, but if that's really gonna ruin your situation, I could do it by the end of next week. I'll just have to stay up late some night and figure this out.
So you could do
Did
it
you
by
have-
the 27th.
Yeah.
Did you have comments beyond what you made tonight?
I haven't had time to look at task 3 yet, so I don't know.
Would that work for you, Marcy, the 27th?
Is that, as long as that's good for you, we will meet your timeline, Teresa.
Okay.
All right, thanks. I appreciate that flexibility.
So I see Dan Shear and Sam Martin. Any other comments? Terry, did you have any other questions? Okay. Well, we appreciate everyone's time. We appreciate you logging into the meeting. We ask that you do spread the word of this meeting being available on the website to anyone who has not, who you think might be interested, who was not able to attend. Again, the website does have the tasks reports available for download and review. And then if we can get the bulk of the comments by this Friday, that would be very helpful. With Bob, we understand the 27th. And at this time, I think we're ready to end the meeting.
I was just posting the website.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Marcy.
All right, thank you. I'm
Thank
in the
you.
meeting.
Thank you for everybody coming.